Nerd morning, everyone. My name is Jeremy. This is Joseph,
Hey guys.
and this is the Nerd Morning Show, a place where we celebrate nerd culture by talking about books, video games, comics, and a bunch more. Today, we are diving in to Foundation, which is going to be a series on Apple TV Plus, I think is how the designation is for their series. And this is the Foundation series is based off of the science fiction book slash series, depending on the publication nuance, by Isaac Asimov, who is a tremendous author. And I think his robot series is probably the one that's known
Very well, especially with the iRobot movie several years back.
Yeah. This though is one of his more powerfully influential stories.
By far.
And it also is one that it explores some really interesting concepts that sci-fi really is the genre that can talk about some of these ideas. And I feel like, some of the genres talk and explore things a little bit better. Not that they're exclusive. You can only talk about these ideas here, but the genre lends to that really well. And
very much so.
And this just explores some of those concepts that that sci-fi can do inside of that fantasy subsection in a really cool way. And it's a foundation for a ton of sci-fi in the future as well.
Inspirational to people like George Lucas, Brandon Sanderson, to name two, right? So
the publication history, I think, is pretty interesting. The Foundation book was published in the 1950s. I believe it was
1951.
There were some short stories that were added to the collection he actually had in some magazines that linked together into this world that he was building. I should say universe that he's building, that were I think as early as 1941 even. So this is a story that he'd been tinkering with and playing with for about a decade of publishing history when the book Foundation came out, which I think is also telling, because you have a story that's either in the back of your head or you're mulling over or working at that, and that's a big part of that experience and process. And it's just simply laid out here.
It adds to the richness. It adds a story that has a lot of thought behind it. That's one reason you and I like Brandon Sanderson so much. He puts a lot of thought into these. He plans them out and makes them really big and really rich. Asimov was a forerunner of this type of thing.
Let's jump right in first, kind of to the reactions of the trailer and the kind of the Disney the Apple Plus project, and then let's dive into the story that we know a little bit from Foundation. So I just watched and rewatched the trailer a couple minutes ago, just kind of in preparation for this. The cast looks amazing,
right?
The design is gorgeous. What are some of your initial thoughts though on what they're doing on the project on Apple?
They're definitely taking the entire scope of the universe. It looks like we're going to get a lot more insight into the empire that is at the beginning of the book, the foundations, kind of things that are growing within that empire that eventually lead to its crashing down, which is part of the plot. But it definitely looks like they're going to be giving us a little more of that, which makes sense for the medium as a video, to fill in a few more of those things and have different points of view, because the book really only has one point of view. It has multiple as you go through the different sections, but it's only that one person per episode that you have the viewpoint. So we're going to get a little bit more of I think the behind the scenes, I think they're going to be drawing from a little bit of the prequel books
Hmm.
for this as well. Uh, but well, the biggest thing that hit me was some of the differences in technology. When we
Yeah.
start into the book, their super duper amazing, awesome, futuristic technology is still based on microfilm.
Uh-huh.
1951, an automatic microfilm projector. That was awesome.
That was high level
Right?
technology.
That was
Yeah.
super sweet. So Apple is having to take some of those ideas and tweaking them for, you know what, we're way past that. Sorry. All right.
Yeah.
So I thought that was just a really interesting thing that they'd have to take and tweak. Also, looking back at the history, 1951, we're just coming out of World War II,
Hmm.
where the greatest piece of technology was the television,
Uh-huh.
right? So just some of those differences in his perspective at the time to where we are now, to Apple extrapolating that story and that vision.
Hmm.
I'm excited, to say the least. It'll be fun.
One of the things that I think is interesting, particularly with that link in history, is we did see during that period with the Great War and World War II, is actual like empires crumbling. You know,
True.
that was a thing that
Yeah.
you saw, and there
Mhm.
were these people who would have been like, oh yeah, this is going to last forever, and
Uh-huh.
it collapsed, and it
Right.
collapsed in front of Isaac Asimov as he's living his regular life,
That's a
and
good point.
experiencing those. And so here we have this society. It's kind of a I would say Roman Empire-esque vibes are what I get from what
Yeah.
they designed from the movie, or for the trailers for the series. And also we've got the, what do they call it? The not peacekeepers, but the royal
The
family.
governing family, governing
Yeah.
body. Yeah. Uh-huh.
They have this like really like sweet sounding name, and they're very like this, they're like supposed to, like, they have got good PR, right?
Uh-huh.
Yet them having all of this extreme power, and the society that they have is going to collapse to the level of a great dark age that's presumably going to be able to last for 30,000 years, without help,
Uh-huh.
really sets this empire up as having significant problems. I think it's not far hard to look at the governing family and the system itself having some problematic elements. And I
Uh-huh.
think you also have like conversations of imperialism and these types of things versus what was high aspects inside of that conversation of in politics is, that you have the political organizations that we have, like here in the United States, where you get elected officials, and
Right. Uh-huh.
the people are important in charge, and those type of ideologies would have been really prevalent. And I think you just see the empire that collapses having some of those older world ideals
Yeah.
versus those. I just like, I see those being things that he would talk about naturally because of the world that he was living at the time when it was written.
Right. Yeah. Good points. Yeah. The the story starts off with kind of in an interesting way. It starts off with this guy going to his first job right out of
Hmm.
graduate school, wants to see a little bit of the world. He ends up being followed by a spy, covertly interrogated by a spy, surprise meeting with his new boss, and being told it's very likely you and I are going to be arrested tomorrow. See you there, right?
What a way to start a job.
Right? It's crazy. But he dives into uh, the math they have termed psychohistory,
Yes.
basically using large amounts of data from history, statistics of some sort, to then be able to see where things are on a large scale, not on a person by person scale, but on a
Mhm.
large scale of where history is going from here. Basically, plotting the future by
Yeah.
using the past.
Yeah.
And he goes into court. They're all, angry at him because they think he's stirring up a rebellion, but really he's trying to lessen that 30,000 years down to, I believe it was 7,000, something like that.
Yeah, like he was trying to go as low as like a
As low as
millennium.
he can of
Yeah.
this horrific dark ages, because the empire, everything is founded and built on this governmental infrastructure. So
Yeah.
when it collapses and dies, he's trying to shorten that span as much as he can, and he sets up the foundation of an encyclopedia, to be set up on a world, and this everything that's going to go on there, as he puts it to the imperial body, is they're going to be making an encyclopedia. We need to preserve knowledge to
Mhm.
make this horrific thing shorter. Makes
Yeah.
perfect sense, but it's more than that too. So
Mhm. Yes, which I think is an interesting twist and makes sense. And I don't know, as a fun element. Yeah, Selden essentially creates the foundation. He gets two, groups of people, most specifically scientists and engineers, to help build this project. And he has alternative plans. Ultimately, though, to save humanity and to save the collapse of humanity, which is fascinating. And I think the idea of like psychohistory, like big data, like I've listened to so many TED Talks about big data and how to predict markets and futures and things like that. And like these are in some ways things that we do actually implement.
right.
And pulling it and building it out into this sci-fi element, I think is really interesting and cool. And it sets up for a pretty awesome story. And I'm excited to see what Apple does and how they pull together something that has been so influential to so many readers and writers.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Yeah. If you claim to be an avid reader, at least of fantasy, I know some people are super avid readers of nonfiction and uh, other types of books, and that's cool. But if
mhm.
you claim to be like hardcore reader, hardcore, nerd of fantasy sci-fi, this really needs to be on your list of books to at least read once. All of Isaac Asimov, in fact, because it's
Mhm.
been so influential to so many stories. If nothing else, it's nice to see kind of where that gleaning has come from.
Yeah.
Star Wars, super influenced by Isaac Asimov, the idea of the major empire through the
Mhm.
entire universe,
Mhm.
and so on. And Brandon Sanderson, he took the idea of the robot stories and the foundation stories and how eventually they merge
Mhm.
together. He thought that was just fascinating and amazing. But instead of doing it as an afterthought like Asimov did,
Mhm.
which still turned out really neat, he started the Cosmere, the idea of his Cosmere that he has, started from that foundation, if you
Yeah.
will,
Yeah.
to mix different stories in different worlds. So all of the Cosmere novels are separate stories, but they are going to a single ending point, and that's just cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that that's awesome. For me, I am fascinated to see how things come together, who inspired who, and that kind of stuff. Like I remember about a year and a half ago, I was like, I'm really fascinated with like Brandon Sanderson, who is somebody that he was inspired by, and I was
Uh-huh.
like, Robert Jordan. Okay, that's really cool. Now, who was he inspired by? What were the things that he did? Oh, well, he one of the ones where he was inspired by was Tolkien, and like so I went through some of their big works and
Right.
was trying to go through this like chronology of writership, right?
Uh-huh.
And I don't know, I think that that's super cool. And with Isaac Asimov's works, like being so heavily influential, like, yeah, adding this onto that reading list totally makes sense. Now, if you like, it doesn't really sound like something for me, does that mean you're like not a nerd? Like, no, not at all. Like,
No.
like totally, do your thing, choose to read or not read what you want. That's totally 100% valid. But if you want to dive into things that do have, carry over in the decades, I mean, this one being what, 70, 80 years, depending on how you claim
Right,
it
where
as
does it
being,
start?
right?
Uh-huh.
That's, it's stuck around for a while and has some interesting ideas, and I
Yep,
think that it will, it could be a tool to help expand your thinking of particularly the sci-fi genre.
definitely. Definitely.
Yeah. Joseph, you have any other things that add? There's tons of things we can cover.
Oh,
um,
so much. I'm curious to see how far Apple goes, at least in the first season, because
yes,
the book itself is broken up into eras. I
yes.
can totally see them going through the second era
Hmm.
in the book, which touches a little bit on religion and how it can affect history, which is a very interesting way to put it in a sci-fi book. It's not
Hmm.
usually something you see there.
Yeah.
Um, as well as technologies and
Hmm.
trade and so many different things. Uh, I am curious to see how far Apple takes any, if any, of those themes through the different seasons. I'm expecting they will are hoping to do a multiple season show out of this.
Yeah.
There's certainly the
um,
material for it.
yeah, from the trailer I saw what looks like multiple eras, at least two
Uh-huh.
in the trailer. I could be deceived, right? I could be
Right?
seeing it and interpreting that wrong. But it looks like they could, and I don't know, however they thread those together, there's a couple of ways that you could do it. um, as an adaptation, obviously take one chunk at a time,
Uh-huh.
which that's totally feasible. Trying to thread some of those things over the top of each other, and you kind of get they're trying to do something here, and here's how it affects it here. And there's a lot of ways that you could choose to approach that and reinterpret how that story is structured.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
uh, I don't know.
I'm excited to
We'll
see it. I
see.
really am. The first time I went through this book, I'd heard of Asimov for a long time, different things. Um, I had read one of the robot books in high school.
Hmm.
Then I just kind of fell out of sci-fi for a long time. But then Sanderson saying he was inspired by Asimov got me to say, "All right, I'm going to try it out again." And just
What's here now? Yeah.
right, what's here that he's seeing, because I love his stuff, and it was really great experience. So interesting to see the level of science, or at least
Mhm.
scientific ideas that were going into to this possible futuristic state. The
Yeah.
Some of the ways where he kind of plugs in, yeah, humanity, it's great, it's been around forever, but we don't know where they started.
Yeah.
They lose Earth. They're so far out, they lose Earth. Uh, it's so fascinating, the little teeny pieces that are put in throughout,
Hmm. Yeah.
and the many
And
elements.
yeah,
So fun.
how all of those things do also, I think, really make sense. Like, for us, 100 years ago, we can pretty much date what was really going on.
Yeah,
1,000 years ago, we we
it's
pretend to
harder.
know,
Uh-huh. We know
but
some
there's,
things.
yeah,
Yeah.
but there are certainly nuances or technologies or ways of thinking or systems, all that kind of stuff. We go, we think that's kind of like this. Our
Uh-huh.
records that we have suggest this, but we lose information. We do.
Yeah.
And when we continue accruing knowledge, we lose things. And I think that's interesting that it is something that he touches on with this in his
Uh-huh.
imagination of the future. And I imagine that we will continue to forget things throughout our history as we continue creating new things and learning new things throughout our history.
It would make sense.
Yeah. All right. Well, that I think is where we're going to wrap out for this right now. There's again like so many more things. Sake
Only
of time.
So much time.
Yes.
Yeah.
But this is one to put on your radar. Foundation is going to be going to Apple Plus in October. Platforms.
September 24th. Okay.
September 24th.
I wanted to get it right. September 24th.
Thank you. So September 4th, 24th. I'm really good at the dates right now. September 24th is when you can find this on Apple's streaming service. You can also find other content for Nerd Morning, like I said, on podcast form, on YouTube, also on Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, different places like that at Nerd Morning. So check all of that out. You can find all the different links at nerdmorning.com/links, and go check things out and you'll find more stuff to enjoy. I promise it. All right, Joseph, thank you so much for joining me today. We will talk to you all later at another time.